Let's read the Bible. Today's passage is from 1 Samuel chapter 17 verses 41 through 49. 1 Samuel chapter 17 verses 41 through 49. This is really well-known story. So I'm going to read in NIV if you want to read with me. Please feel free to do so. Meanwhile, the Philistine, whose name is Goliath, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not my sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. Amen. I'm grateful that it is raining finally. I started a home gardening, and I learned that when it rains, I don't have to water them. Praise the Lord. And the thing is, when I get the natural rain, they bear better fruits. And I'm actually recently working on cucumbers. I got small cucumbers, so I hope and pray when the rain stops, I'll be able to get my first fruits, and I'll enjoy my first fruits. And again, can we turn around to each other and tell them, now this time, let's not say peace, just tell them hello, or tell them I'm glad you're here, or good to see you. Can you turn around and make some eye contact and welcome each other again? Before I move on to the next slide, I spent a lot of, thinking and worrying about it, because I've been recommending a lot of TV shows, and you may think, wait, the pastor is only watching TV shows, but that's not what I'm doing. I usually watch TV shows using YouTube video. They say, finish this season in 30 minutes. That's how I watch TV shows. If I like it, I go back. But this one, I really want to recommend to you. It's called 이상한 변호사 우영우. It's on Netflix. It's Extraordinary Attorney Woo. If you haven't watched this TV show, I would humbly recommend it if you have time, and if you are okay with watching a TV show with English subtitles, because as you can see, everyone there speaks in Korean. But the reason why I really like this show is this. I said the title of this TV show is Extraordinary Attorney, but if I do the direct translation, it's gonna Strange Attorney Woo. So what it means is, let me explain. As you can see, there's a yellow skirt lady in the middle of this picture. Her name is Young Woo, and she's a lawyer. She's an attorney. She is a person who has autism spectrum disorder, but she was able to graduate from her law school with a top score, and then according to the story, it's not a real story, she almost got a perfect score on her bar test. There's no lawyer in Korea who has autism, but based on some article, it says in the United States there are one attorney, a lawyer, who has the same disorder. Even though she has this order, she was able to achieve something great in her life, and then she was able to share some positive influences to people around her. Even though she's really smart and she was able to get great scores, if you watch this TV show, whenever she meets clients, they become really uncomfortable to let attorney Wu work on their cases. Because the way she behaved, the way she talked, and the way she looked are different than most of other people. But one thing I really like about this TV show is this. They approach to this disorder really seriously and also really carefully. So if you get a chance, I would recommend this TV show to you. One thing I want to point out from this is this. Even though the main character, Wu, has a big obstacle in her that seems almost impossible to overcome, she somehow was able to manage it and overcome it and achieve more than other people could do. And there's a reason why I want to start with this TV show. Have you ever faced a wall in your life that seems almost impossible to climb over? I believe everyone has this type of experience at least once in our life. There are some times when we are faced with situations that it seems to be impossible to overcome, or there are some situations that we try to stay away or to avoid. However, no matter how hard we try, it is impossible to avoid it. When you face certain situations, we feel hopelessness. And then with this in mind, I want to read today's passage together. So this is what happened in today's passage. There was another war between Israel and Philistine. And then for these battles, they drafted all the men who were able to fight. David was anointed before this happened, and David's old brothers were drafted to the battlefields, and then they did not hear any news for a long period of time. So Jesse, the father of David, sends David to his brother. So David travels to the battlefield to deliver food and some other stuff to his brothers. And then this is what he brought to his brothers. This 17 through 18. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them." And then if I change this unit to modern language, David by himself brought 5.8 gallons of grain, and he brought 10 loaves of bread and 10 cheeses. And this is how far he traveled. The distance between Bethlehem, where he lived, to the battlefield, which was in the valley of Elah, he traveled 73 to 75 miles, carrying 5.8 gallons of grain, 10 loaves of bread, and 10 cheese. Because he cared about his brother. And David was only 15 to 16 years old when this happened. He took a long trip. He walked, or he was on the camel, or he was on the camel, or he was on a horse, I don't know. But he was carrying 5.8 gallons of grain, 10 loaves of bread, 10 cheese, and traveled 73 to 75 miles to check on his brothers. And then after this long trip, he faced a reality. He traveled with some expectations. He was thinking, if I travel this long, my brothers will welcome me and I'll be able to bring some good news back to my dad, and my dad will be happy about it. But as soon as he finished his trip, the reality he faced was the Israel soldiers who were being depressed because of the existence of a giant military leader whose name was Goliath. everyone was giving upon their battle, and then everyone was feeling hopeless because in their eyes, Goliath was the obstacle that seems almost impossible to overcome. And from this super well-known story, I want to share two lessons with you. The first one is this. It is not our problems where we should fix our eyes on. This is what verse 41 to 42 say. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Now think about it. Goliath was giant. I don't know how big he was in real, but according to the Bible, it looks like he was over like 7 point something feet, and he must be muscular or something. So he was a giant soldier. And the Bible says David was a little boy. He was only 15 to 16-year-old. You must know around you who is 15 or 16 years old kid. Smaller kid. I imagine this. If I was Goliath, and if there was a 15 or 16-year-old boy in front of me who has never fought in the battle before, even with my height, even with my size, the person who is standing in front of me will be caught with fear because there's an expectation for me. I'm bigger, I'm older, that means I must be a better warrior. That was not it. David was standing there by himself, but this giant warrior was not by himself. He was bringing his weapon, but in front of him, there was a shield bearer. There were some people who was protecting this man, Goliath. So David is again facing with a situation that he cannot overcome by his own might. When we face with an obstacle, there are two things we need to do. The first thing we need to do, we need to ask ourselves, should we go over this obstacle or should we go around? If there's no way around, should we just leave and change the path? And the second, we have to think about this. If we have decided to overcome the obstacle, we need to find the tools or methods to get over it. When figuring out a way, the important thing is to look around. If you just look at the obstacles only that is too big or that is too complicated for you to overcome, you will never be able to overcome them because as you look at the obstacles longer and longer, the feeling you're going to feel is hopelessness. Well, we all know this with our common sense, but in reality, think about when you face a situation that is almost impossible to overcome again. What do we feel? We start panicking. When our relationships are breaking apart, we start panicking. When we are facing with some financial difficulties, we start panicking. When we're having issues with our family, we start panicking. When we have church issues, we have panicking. But panicking is fine, but what matters is what comes after panic. As we panic, we are getting obsessed with the problem. You know, in psychotherapy, what the therapists and social workers trying to teach the clients or the patients is help them to stay in reality. They try to make them feel distracted from what they are panicking about. As you are obsessed with the thing that makes you panic or that makes you feel anxious about, you will be more panicking and you'll be more anxious about it because you will feel hopeless over and over and over and over. In other words, when we face a situation or difficulty or an obstacle, and when we panic, we forget the fact that there are helpers around us. We forget to focus on the other things, but we only focus on the fact that we are troubled. In other words, bigger our problems are, more we become obsessed with them. You know what? In today's passage, Israel people have never fought against Goliath. The only thing they talk about Goliath is his body size. We don't know whether if he was a good warrior. We don't know whether he was a good soldier. He was just big. But because they were only cared about what they were seeing, what they were feeling, they were not able to figure out how to deal with their situation. They feel the feelings of failure. Both King Saul and Israel people, they were terrified. They were panicking because they only focus on the problems. We all know this. The things that we are worrying about right now, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, it will be nothing. Think about when you were in high school. We were worried about going to college. When you were graduating from college, you were worried about getting work. When you broke up with your when you broke up with your exes, you thought, can I meet another person again? If you have not had exes, that's wonderful. But what happens? A year later, days later, no, days are too short, weeks later, months later, years later, new person appears in your life. Something that looks too big right now becomes nothing if time passes. So if we only focus on the problems, we are actually wasting our time. That's what David knew. He knew the real problem that he was facing with was not Goliath, the giant warrior. And how can we be confident when everyone was in fear? The answer is here. This ordinary day that you are living every day is a time to prepare for spiritual warfare. This is what 45 to 46 say, verses. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. Let me tell you a little bit about David. When God called David as a king, when he was 15, he's been even ignored by his family. When Prophet Samuel first visited David's house to find the next king, Jesse, their father, started calling from the very first son. But until Samuel asked them, "Do you have one more son?" David was in the field. Even his even his father was thinking, David is not a person who could be a king. You know where this teenage boy spent most of his life when he was younger? He spent most of his time in the field to tend his family's animals. He was in the wilderness by himself with the animals. Being in the wilderness during this time means he had to kill other wild animals such as foxes or wolves or other wild animals who are trying to attack his animals. And he also had to fight against the thieves and robbers from the fields. His life was in danger. That's how David lived most of his life. You know what is the second thing that makes us more difficult when we face a problem other than we feel panicked? It is how other people talk about it. When you are in a trouble, most feedbacks from other people are very negative. It is the same when we are caught with fear. People say, "You deserve it. you cannot do it. Just give up and do something else. David was the same way. He was only a 15 or 16-year-old boy who was not tall enough to be in a field to fight. But he was able to ignore how other people were talking about it because he knew something that other people did not know about him. When he was in the field every day, when no one was paying attention to him, when even his dad was forgetting about his existence, when no one was calling him to be a part of the family, every single day in the field, he was trained to be a soldier because he was protecting his animals from people and from the other wild animals. And that was not it. When he was alone, when no one was paying attention to him, he spent his every single ordinary times with God. That he was able to have confidence did not happen overnight. His faith started and grew stronger as he was spending more time in the field, doing his everyday chores day by day. While the other brothers were saying, go out. While other brothers were giving up, while all Israel people, even the king of Israel people were terrified, David was able to stay confident and he was able to fulfill God's great plan because he was prepared in his ordinary days. That's why we've been focusing on the three things. Daily, we read the Bible. Weekly, we come to church. And every day in our life, for lifelong, we try to help each other people. It may look like nothing. You may feel like you are wasting your time, or you may feel like you may be super busy even to read the Bible on a daily basis, or you may be too busy to come to church or come to worship on a weekly basis. However, if we can make a spiritual and divine routines in our lives, in our ordinary days, God is going to use the small things to do something great in our near future. So there must be something that you are doing over and over and over. I asked myself, what am I doing over and over? I said, doing dishes. And I decided to make doing dishes as an act of worship. As I clean the dishes, I pray, God, as I'm making this dish clean, make me clean. We take shower. We wash our hands more than ever. Then we talk to friends. We talk to coworkers. We go to work. We go to drive. We drive the cars every day to work or somewhere else. Every these things can be a worship, can be a preparation for our spiritual battles in the field. Let's try to be intentional. Let's try to be remembering God and from the very small things we do. Put some meanings into it that God is going to use it to strengthen you and to let you win in the battles in your near future. Remembering this, I want us to think about these questions. What is taking up most of your thoughts these days? How can you experience God in your ordinary day? What kind of spiritual trainings do you practice every day? Or do you decide to practice every day? I hope you can think about these questions, ask yourself, and I hope we can make a decision to practice something to be spiritually disciplined from today.